Mesachas Kesubos Daf Tzadi Vav begins the 11th parak of the Masechta, parak Almona Nizonos, which discusses the halacha of mizonos, that is the food subsidy that the orphans, the inheritors of a woman's husband, have to give her after the death of the husband, after the death of their father. We begin with the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, an Almana, a widow, receives a food subsidy from her husband's children, which may or may not be her own children, and in exchange for that, she has to give them her work, her ma'asidayim, her earnings. Just like when her husband was alive, she gave her earnings to him in exchange for food subsidy. When it's the yisomim, she gives her earnings to them in exchange for the food subsidy. However, there's a difference, and that's they don't have to bury her after she dies. Her own children, her own inheritors, who will inherit her ksuba that she received from her husband, they have to bury her, but the children of her husband, the inheritors of her husband, don't need to bury her. Now, the husband himself did have to bury her. That was in exchange for what he got out of the ksuba, and he inherited his wife. However, if he died already, then he didn't get anything, and therefore the inheritors don't need to bury her. Nothing more begins with the question. As always, if there's a Lashon question, if there's a linguistic issue, we clear that up first. And the question is, does it say Almana Nizonis or Almana Hanizonis? The difference is, if it says Almana Nizonis, then the Mishnah is telling us that a widow must be fed by the orphans. There is no choice in the matter. Until she demands a ksuba, they're obligated to feed her. That was the custom of the people of the Galil. They could not choose to stop feeding her. On the other hand, the Mishnah, the correct text may be Almana Hanizonis, which is an almana who is being fed. That indicates that not all almanas are being fed by the Yisomim. There is a choice. Some are, some aren't. And the Mishnah is telling us that those are, they get her ma'asidayim. Now, this would be in accordance with the people of Yehuda, where they said that there is a choice. The Yisomim can choose to give her her ksuba or to feed her up front. Now, so therefore, what is the correct version of the Mishnah, and what is Mishnah Lagas Halacha is? Do the Yisomim have to feed her, or do the Yisomim have a choice to give her ksuba up front instead? So the Gemara says, let's bring a proof, because Rabbi Zera says in the name of Shmuel, halacha that only makes sense if there is an option for the almana not to be fed, and that's that they say that an almana gets to keep her own mitzvah, she gets to keep her own found objects. Now, generally, a married woman has to give her found objects to her husband in exchange for her mizonos. Therefore, if she's being fed by the Yisomim, she should also give her found objects to the Yisomim. If she's being fed by her husband's Yisomim, that is, she should have to give her found objects to them in exchange for the food subsidy. Why does she not have to do that? It must be that there is a situation in which she is not being fed, and that would only make sense if the Mishnah is telling us that the halacha is like the Bnei Yehuda, and they have a way of opting out of having to feed her by giving her ksuba up front. So it says the Gemara, this is potentially not the right shot. I could tell you otherwise. I could tell you that really every almana has to get fed. She has to have a food subsidy, like the people of the Galil said. Someone cannot opt out. However, they still don't get her found objects, and that's because the reason that the Rabbanim were talking that a husband receives his wife's found objects in exchange for feeding her is because otherwise there would be hatred. He would be upset by the fact that he has to spend all this money on her and he doesn't get much out of it. However, the children, the Yisomim, are going to be upset anyway because this is not their wife. It's not their wife, and it's potentially not their mother, and they don't want to have to be feeding her, but they're forced to because that's the halacha. So they're going to be displeased about the situation anyway. You're not going to accomplish anything by giving them the found objects that she has. All right, now the Gemara quotes additional halachas on the topic. The Gemara says, Rabbi Yisrael Chanina says, all the work that a woman performs for her husband, an almana has to perform for the yisomim, except for the three types of work which are not really work. They are terms of endearment. They are ways of showing love between a husband and a wife, and that is mixing his drink, making the bed for him, and washing his hands, feet, and face. That is a special marital activity, and that is not appropriate for the almana to be doing for the yisomim. Says Rabbi Shua ben Levi, on a similar note, any work which a servant, an eved, performs for his master, a talmid should perform for his rebbe, except for untying his shoelaces. Says Rava, that is only true in a place where people don't know who he is and are not going to realize that he is a talmid. They'll think that means that this person is an eved. We don't want confusion as to who's an eved and who's not an eved. However, in a place where people know him and know that this is a rebbe-talmid relationship, they'll understand that he's serving him as a student serves his teacher, not as a slave serves his master. Now, says the Gemara, another way that this is okay is if he's wearing tefillin. If he's wearing tefillin, people are going to understand that he's not an Eved Kenani. Now, on the topic of serving a Rabbi, the Gemara says, Rav Chiya bar Abba said, named Rav Yochanan, anybody who does not allow his students to serve him is preventing chesed from them. He's keeping kindness from them. Like the pasuk says, Lomas meirehu chesed, he's keeping chesed from his friend. Rav Nachman Yitzchak says he's also removing the yoke of fear of heaven, of Yirah Shamayim from him, like it says right after that in the same pasuk. It says V'yiras shakai azov, pasuk in Sefer Eov. The Gemara now returns to the subject of Mizonos. Rabbi Elazar says halacha and almana who grabs metaltalin to pay off her Mizonos, she can keep what you grab. Now, generally, the halacha is that metaltalin and ksuba, that Mizonos and ksuba are only collectible from karka, not from metaltalin, and therefore she should not be taking metaltalin for her Mizonos. However, in this case, she took metaltalin, which is movable objects, as opposed to real estate, so she grabbed them, and Rabbi Elazar says she has the right to keep them. Now, the Gemara says the Brisa says that as well, exact same halacha. And when Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael, he said there was an incident that happened with the daughter-in-law of Rav Shabsi, that she grabbed a bag of money, and the bezin couldn't take it away from her because of this halacha. What she grabbed, she's allowed to keep metaltalin that she grabbed to pay off her Mizonos. So Rav Dina says it's only true for Mizonos, but not for Ksuba. Ksuba, we will take it away from her. So Marabar Rav asks, why should that be true? Ksuba and Mizonos are the same. They're both meant to be paid from karka and not from metaltalin. So therefore he disagrees, and he says anything which she grabs, whether it's for ksuba or for mizonos, she grabs metaltalin, she's allowed to hold on to what she grabbed. Now Rabbi Yitzchak bar Naftali said to Ravina, this is what they said in the name of Rava. They said, like you, not like what Marabar Rav Ashi said, that you're only allowed to grab for a mizonos and not for ksuba. Now the Gemara brings another halacha. Rav Yechon says the name of Rav Yosef ben Zimra, an almana who does not ask for a ksuba for 2 or 3 years, she does not ask for mizonos, that is, for 2 or 3 years, she loses her right to claim mizonos for those 2 or 3 years. She can start claiming again for the future, but what she didn't ask for, we assume she was meichelet, she gave up her rights to it, and therefore she can't start asking for it now. So Gemara says, why? First of all, what do you mean 2 or 3 years? Is it 2 years or 3 years? If she gives up the right after 2 years, certainly she gives it up after 3 years. Gemara says it depends what type of woman she is. There's 2 ways to explain this, either rich or poor. A poor woman is assumed to have to claim it after 2 years. If she doesn't claim it after 2 years, she must have been mochlet. A rich woman may not want to claim it until after 3 years. After 3 years, you assume that she's mochlet, or potentially the difference is if she is a outspoken person or a shy person. If she's shy, we could understand that she waited 3 years, but not longer. An outspoken person, we could understand she waited 2 years, but not longer. Now, Rava points out, like we said, and when we explained that she only loses what already passed. What comes in the future, she has a right to collect. Now, the Gemara brings another halacha shayla. The Gemara says, Rav Yochanan asks the question, what happens if there's an argument between the Yisomim and the Almana, whether they paid mizonos or not? The Yisomim say we paid it, and the Almana said, I did not receive it. So who is believed? Whoever is believed is the muhsik, the one considered to be holding the money. So do we say that the Yisomim are the muhsik because they have the money, and she's trying to get them to pay, and therefore she has to bring the proof? Or do we say no, because she's trying to collect something which is Tanai Bezdin, the Bezdin said they have to give, she is assumed to be the one who has the upper hand. The Bezdin said that they has to give it unless they can prove that they gave it already. Says the Gemara can bring a proof to resolve this question. We have a brisa of Levi who says an almana who is not married, not remarried for a second time, the orphans, the Yisomim, have to prove that they paid if they want to claim it. Until then, we assume that she did not get paid, and the burden of proof is upon them. She is believed, and she is assumed to be the muhzik as well. The Gemara now wants to say this very question is at the source of a machlokas tanaim, and the Gemara will try to shake it loose and have 2 ways of saying that it does not actually pshat in this machlokas tanaim. Where do you see a machlokas tanaim over who the muhsik on the mizonos is? Is it the almana or the Yisomim? So the Gemara quotes a machlokas, a brisa brings a machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosi about when a woman sells property in order to collect her mizonos. She sells property from her husband's estate that she had hold of. In order to collect us, you have to write into the document of sale what she's selling it for, to collect the mizonos or to collect her ksuba. So Rabbi Yehuda says she better write it, and Rabbi says she doesn't have to write it. And Rabbi Yossi adds a line. He says, and that is the power of her claim. That's kocha yafeh. So Gemara says, what are they arguing about? What's at the root of the question of should she write what it's for or not? So Gemara says, probably they're arguing the following things. They're arguing over whether if she gets into a fight with the Yisomim as to whether or not they paid the Mizonos, who's going to win. Rabbi Yehuda says if she gets into a fight with the Yisomim, they are going to win. Therefore, if she doesn't write what she's selling it for, the Yisomim will say that money that you took, you sold, you collected your ksuba with that money. And even though you can prove that you have ksuba, that you're owed ksuba, you have the ksuba document, still, we're going to say that you paid it because we know that you sold some of our father's land and you collected with it. Now, she's going to come back and say, okay, so you want to claim that was ksuba money, so now you have to pay me mizonos. So in that, they'll say, we paid you, and there's no document about that, and therefore we paid you, and there's nothing to discuss, and she is going to lose that case because Rabbi Yehuda holds that the chazaka is with the muchzik is the yisomim. Now Rabbi Yossi says she doesn't have to write it because Rabbi Yossi disagrees. Rabbi Yossi says worst comes to worst, whatever they're going to say, she'll at least get something. If they say that what she sold was to pay off the mizonos, so she has a document proving that she's owed ksuba. If they say it's a ksuba, so then she'll say that they owe the mizonos, and if they say we paid it, she's going to win, and therefore that is l'chora the source of this machlokas. So this is not necessarily pshat machlokas. To tell you totally different pshat machlokas. It has nothing to do with who's going to win if she gets into a fight with the yisomim. It has to do with how it looks. If she sells property, and she sells a lot of property, enough for her ksuba and for her mizonos, people are going to think, wow, this lady eats a lot. Well, it's just to sell all that property just for her mizonos. They're not going to realize that's for ksuba as well. If she gets a reputation as being a big eater, nobody's going to want to marry her. It's going to be costly and expensive. Therefore, she's better off writing in the bill of sale what it's for, so people shouldn't think that it's all for mizonos. It's just really good advice for the woman as far as keeping her marriage prospects positive. Says the Gemara, you have to say this pshat, and you cannot say that this machlokas is really based on the question of who the muchzik is. Because remember, Rabbi Yochanan was bothered, but he didn't have an answer. He asked the question, who's the muchzik? Who would win if the Yisomim go against the Almana as to whether or not they paid the mizonos yet or not? Now we have a Mishnah coming up in the Tzadi Zayin that very clearly says the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. It very clearly says that a woman who sells has to write that I'm selling my husband's property in order to take mizonos. That, according to the way you guys want to explain it, that Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is based on the understanding that she's going to lose because he's home with a muchzik. So how can Rabbi Yochanan ask who's the muchzik? The Mishnah clearly is holding who's the muchzik is. Now he may not know the brisa about Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda. Fine, not every Amar has to know every brisa, but a Mishnah, straightforward Mishnah that's coming up soon, he definitely has to know that. So it wouldn't make sense if he would ask that question in the first place. Obviously, that wasn't the pshat. That's not how Rabbi Yochanan understood that Mishnah. The Mishnah was not ruling based on the fact that the Yisomim will beat her if they claim she collected the mizonos already. That brisa was just good advice. She better write it into the shtar, otherwise people are going to think she's a big eater. So here in this, that's pshat in the Mishnah, so that's pshat in Rabbi Yehuda, the brisa as well. That is just good advice that people shouldn't think she's a big eater. Says the Gemara, I'll tell you a second explanation in this machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi that again has nothing to do with who the muchzik is. And I'll say as follows. Really, everybody agrees that the Yisomim are the muchzik and the Yisomim will win the case if they go up against her. So then I understand Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is clear. That's why she should write what it is so that she doesn't lose her mizonos. What's pshat in Rabbi Yossi that it says she should not write it, she doesn't have to write it. So Gemara explains that this is it's based on a thing that was said by Abaye Kshishah, the old Abaye. It's not the classic Abaye, it's a previous Abaye, a few generations earlier. And he says that actually it's better for the woman not to write what this land is being sold for, so that she keeps her options open. And if she later wants to claim that it was for mizonos or if it was for ksuba, she should be able to claim either one. Why would she want those options open? So if she gets into a fight with Yisomim, she's going to want to claim that she collected mizonos and now she still has right to ksuba. However, she may get into a fight with a purchaser of her husband's property that she wants to take away that guy's land. That guy bought land and now she needs to take it away from the buyer. That's something you can only do if you're collecting a ksuba. You cannot do that if you're collecting mizonos. So she's going to want to say that which she sold was to collect mizonos. not to collect ksuba. Now, says the Gemara, that's very similar to a different situation where somebody was owed money and he was a sick man, and as he was dying, he told people he wasn't owed money, he owed someone else money. He told people to give a gift to the person that he owed. So now he has two things coming to that guy. First of all, he has to pay back the money that he owed. Second of all, he told people to give a gift. So then people are going to come with the money and they're going to give a gift to the guy that he owed. That person could decide, is he receiving gift money now or is he receiving payback money? So it'd be much smarter for him to keep his options open to say that this is gift money, and that way if he wants to come take payback money later, he could take it away from a purchaser and be able to be tarif l'kuchos. Because a gift you cannot take away from l'kuchos, from a purchaser. Only a chov can you do that. So the woman should leave her options open and be able to say that she's collecting her ksuba.